He saw her again, but this time, she wasn't the woman who once walked beside him. She was a mother standing on the street holding two children by the hand and a cardboard sign that read, "Need help. Anything matters." Years ago, Carter had chosen ambition over love. He walked away from Lily, the woman who once prayed over his dreams, in pursuit of wealth and power that eventually left him empty. But that day, on a cold morning outside a grocery store in Ohio, God would place her right in front of him again, not as a memory, but as mercy. What would you do if the person you once broke stood before you, carrying the consequences of your choices? Would you look away, or would you see it? That sacred moment when God hands you a second chance. Because redemption doesn't always come through thunder or miracles. Sometimes it comes through a mother holding her children, whispering faith into the wind while the man who left her stands frozen, realizing God never stopped pursuing either of them. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Redeemed Hearts, where every story reminds us that God's grace still rebuilds what we once destroyed. Now, let's begin the story of Lily and Carter, a story about forgiveness, faith, and the God who writes new beginnings out of broken endings. The light turned red on Main and 4th, and Carter's world stopped with it. Winter air pressed against the windshield, frosting the edges like a frame. His phone buzzed with a bored reminder he suddenly didn't care about. Across the street, a woman held a cardboard sign that fluttered like a prayer. Two kids stood close, their small hands folded into her coat. The mother lifted her chin, dignity steady in the cold wind. Carter recognized her eyes before he remembered her name. Lily. He gripped the steering wheel, leather creaking beneath his palms. The city he'd escaped felt smaller than the silence in his chest. Taillights bled red onto wet asphalt, a heartbeat across the lane. He told himself he could be wrong, that memory lies when it hurts. But memory wasn't lying. It was finally telling the truth. The name moved through him like a confession. Lily. He said it once, and the past answered. A horn behind him nudged him forward. The light turned green. He didn't move. He just watched her shift the sign to her left hand. Need help. Anything matters. The letters were careful, almost neat. She wasn't begging. She was standing, rooted, unbroken. The boy tugged at her sleeve, chin tucked into a faded scarf. The little girl traced her shoe across the salt-streaked curb. Carter felt like a man reading his own obituary. He pulled into the curb lane, hazard lights blinking apology. The act felt both reckless and holy, a trespass toward grace. He reached for his wallet and then stopped, breath tight. Money had always been his answer. Maybe that was the problem. What do you bring to the door you once slammed? What do you carry to the grave you helped dig? His hands trembled, empty of anything that mattered. He stepped out into the cold, the city a chorus of tires and wind. Smell of coffee from the corner shop rose like mercy. He rehearsed a line that kept collapsing in his mouth. Lily, But the syllables fell, fragile as ash. She looked up, and time bridged the years without asking. Her eyes were older, steadier, storm-tested and clear. They did not accuse him. They simply knew him. Can I? He started, words thin in the winter air. The boy edged behind Lily's leg, peeking with curious courage. The little girl clutched a folded paper snowflake bent at the tip. Lily's voice arrived like a door gently closing. Hi, Carter. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition, like a hymn remembered. His name in her mouth felt like both judgment and absolution. He swallowed, heat and cold tangling in his chest. We're okay, she added softly, and somehow he heard everything. We're okay meant we've been through rivers you never crossed. We're okay meant I still stand when the wind says I shouldn't. We're okay meant I don't need you, but I still need God. Carter's gaze fell to the cardboard sign, steady in her grip. Letters lifted like a modest banner over a weary kingdom. Anything matters, the truth beneath every prayer. Let me buy you lunch, he said, voice careful as glass. Lily studied him, not the suit or the watch, but the eyes. She searched for the man who once chose doors over hands. The boy looked up, brave now. Does lunch have soup? Carter nodded, a smile breaking like a thaw. Soup for sure, the little girl whispered, and bread, like it was a miracle word. Bread, he repeated, and something inside him remembered Bethlehem. They walked toward the corner deli, snow dusting their shoulders. The bell over the door sang, warmth breathing from the ovens. Smells of onion and rosemary braided into a quiet welcome. A server glanced at Lily, then at Carter, then away again. People make stories in a blink, he thought, but God writes longer. They slid into a booth by the window, sleeves steaming dry. Carter took the seat that faced the street, penitent and present. Menus unfolded like maps to a country called enough. 2 soups, please, Lily said, and 2 breads. Carter added, and 1 coffee black. 1 tea, honey. He remembered without asking. She noticed without telling. The boy traced a race car along the menu's border. The girl tucked her snowflake into a napkin cave. Silence settled, not empty, just careful. Are they? He began and stopped himself. Lily's eyes traveled to the children with a soft light. They're my answer, she said, like a line from scripture. It landed tenderly and stayed, warm as a hand on a shoulder. He felt both outside and invited, a porch between 2 homes. Beautiful, he managed, surrendering more air than sound. The server returned, bowls steaming like small mercies. Carter watched the children break bread with the gravity of saints. Lily blew on spoons, patient, present, unhurried by the world. The rhythm of her care turned the booth into sanctuary. He remembered once promising to build her a life with windows. He'd built towers with no doors, instead climbing alone. Regret rose, firm and honest, like a mountain that finally belonged. He let it stand. He didn't argue with the truth. Why are you here, Carter? Lily asked gently, not unkind. He could lie to save face, but he'd been saved enough by lies. I saw you, he said. And I saw what I did not become. The confession surprised him by how right it felt. Ambition gave me floors, but not ground, he added. God keeps pointing me back to places I left. The words settled between them like a wooden cross set down. Lily stirred her tea, the spoon a soft bell in porcelain. God points us home, she said, more to the steam than to him. Sometimes he does it in the hardest ways. Carter nodded, jaw tight, eyes shining. He refused to rub. The boy asked, do you like cars? And Carter exhaled a laugh. Too much, he said, honest again, and lighter for it. Me too. The boy grinned. Alliance sealed. The girl lifted her snowflake for inspection, hope tilted sideways. It ripped, she whispered, apology already forming. Carter accepted it like a relic, gentle as a prayer. We can mend it, he said. Broken doesn't mean finished. Lily looked at him then, a flicker of old truth returning. People forget that, she murmured, and he heard himself included. He smoothed the tear with careful thumbs, practicing redemption. Soup dwindled. Warmth stayed. The window filmed with breath. Outside, the sky gathered clouds like a congregation. Carter imagined 100 turns he'd take to undo one. But redemption wasn't a maze. It was a door with a nail. He felt the hinge shift somewhere deep and quiet. Can I help? He asked, letting the words be small. Not to pay, he added. To show up. Lily measured the sentence, then measured him inside it. Show up how? She asked, making space for clarity. By listening, he said. By carrying, not directing. He winced at his own history, a CEO of other people's lives. Her smile was not agreement. It was recognition of growth. Listening is a start, she said, and the booth breathed. The boy slurped triumphantly. The girl clapped softly. Carter glanced at the deli's corkboard of flyers and needs. A shelter night shift, a pantry schedule, a coat drive list. Service had always been bullet points. Now it looked like breath. I can take the late slots, he heard himself promise. Not perform, not publish, just quietly be there. He pictured fluorescent lights, tired faces, sacred ordinary. For once the image made him feel found. He paid the bill without ceremony, no flourish, no guilt trip. Lily let him, and the allowing felt like a delicate bridge. On the sidewalk, wind lifted the sign again, less heavy now. Can I walk you to the bus? He asked, not assuming. She nodded, gathering gloves, mittens mismatched and brave. The little girl slipped her hand into his without fear. Carter's heartbeat found a gentler drum. They passed the church on the corner, doors propped for warmth. A man stacked boxes by the steps, humming a hymn. Carter paused, then carried 2 without being asked. The hymn floated after them, a thread through gray air. Lily watched him, neither proud nor skeptical, simply present. God was doing his work in plain sight, she thought. Not loud, not late, just right on time. At the bus stop, the schedule flickered behind scratched plexiglass. A gust of snow turned the platform into a shaken globe. The boy pressed his face to the map like a detective. Route C, Lily guided, calm, practiced, steady. Route C, Carter echoed, making the learning humble. Silence settled again, friendly as a quilt on a couch. He didn't fill it. He honored it. The bus arrived with a sigh, kneeling to the curb. Doors parted, warm and bright, a small exodus. Carter stepped back, giving them the first place. Lily turned, eyes steady, a lighthouse in living skin. "Thank you for lunch," she said, simple as truth. "Thank you for letting me listen," he answered. Old language, new grammar, mercy conjugated. The children climbed aboard, mittened hands waving. Carter lifted his palm in a promise he hadn't yet spoken. Lily held his gaze, not clutching, not pushing, just seeing. He wanted to say, "I'm sorry," like it was oxygen. Instead, he said, "I'll be at the shelter tonight." She nodded once, something unclenching in the cold. The doors closed softly, like a prayer finishing. The bus pulled away and Carter stood in the leftover quiet. Main Street resumed its ordinary holy procession. He tucked the mended paper snowflake into his coat pocket, a small repaired thing against his heart, warm as a vow. He looked up. The church cross cut clean through the winter sky. He didn't make a speech. He made a turn, and for the first time in years, the turn felt like home. Carter drove aimlessly after the bus disappeared, the city stretching out like a confession. The snow had turned to drizzle, melting against the windshield in fragile streams. Every drop seemed to trace the years he'd wasted chasing everything but grace. He didn't head home. He couldn't. Home had walls but no warmth. He pulled into a quiet parking lot behind a closed bookstore, heart racing. His hands rested on the steering wheel as memories began to whisper. And like floodgates unlatched, the past poured in without mercy. He remembered that first apartment, barely 2 rooms and a dream. Lily's laughter used to fill the cracks in the walls like sunlight. The radiator clanked, the windows leaked, and yet it felt like heaven. They had nothing but faith, and somehow that was enough. She'd sit cross-legged on the worn couch, Bible open, eyes shining. "Carter," she'd say, "if God can feed the birds, he'll take care of us too." He'd smile then, pretending belief came easy. He remembered the night they prayed for rent money, hands entwined. The next morning, an envelope slid under their door with just enough cash. Lily cried, not because of the amount, but because of the reminder. "See?" she whispered. "He's never late." But Carter was already dreaming of more than enough. He wanted skyscrapers, not envelopes. Applause, not quiet provision. And in that hunger, something sacred began to starve. A flash of memory burned brighter, the argument that ended it all. She'd asked him to slow down, to see her, to stay. He'd laughed bitterly, saying love couldn't pay the bills. She'd answered softly, "Neither can regret." Her voice cracked, but her faith didn't. She turned away first, not in anger, but in surrender. That door closing became the loudest sound in his life. He thought success would silence the ache. It only amplified it. For years, boardrooms replaced blessings, deals replaced dinners. He learned how to speak to investors, but forgot how to listen to God. Every promotion felt emptier than the one before. The bigger the office, the smaller his peace became. And somewhere between deadlines and flights, he stopped praying. He told himself he didn't need grace, he had control. But control can't hold you when your soul starts to slip. He'd watch the city lights from his penthouse window and feel nothing. Just the hum of loneliness dressed as success. He'd scroll through old photos. Lily's smile in a field of wildflowers. He'd zoom in on her eyes, searching for the man she once saw. Some nights he'd whisper her name like a secret he wasn't allowed to keep. And then he'd drown the silence with another project, another plan, until last night. Until Main Street. Until her eyes cut through time and found him again. That single moment stripped his armor faster than failure ever could. He'd seen her standing there, not broken, not bitter, just brave. Holding those 2 children like promises she refused to give up on. He realized then that God had not punished him. He'd pursued him. And now, redemption was standing in the cold, wearing a faded coat. Carter leaned back in the driver's seat, the steering wheel an altar. "God," he whispered, voice shaking, "I don't even know how to begin." Tears slipped down, foreign and fierce, baptizing his regret. He wasn't praying for wealth or peace this time, and just forgiveness. Just the chance to matter again, not as a CEO, but as a man. The kind of man Lily used to pray for. The kind of man who listens when heaven speaks softly. He thought of her children, their innocence, their laughter over soup. How easily they'd accepted him, unknowing of his history. He wondered if that's what grace looks like. Open arms without questions. And maybe through them, God was teaching him what faith really is. It's not building towers. It's showing up with empty hands. It's not earning favor. It's receiving love you don't deserve. It's not about being right. It's about being redeemed. Carter started the engine but didn't drive away yet. He looked at the paper snowflake resting on the passenger seat. Its mended edge caught the streetlight glowing faintly. He ran his finger along the crease and smiled through tears. Broken doesn't mean finished, he murmured, repeating his own words. Maybe God had been whispering that to him all along. Maybe this was the first chapter of something new. A notification lit his phone. A charity email from the church bulletin. Volunteers needed tonight. Food pantry shift, 9 p.m. He stared at the line until it blurred. Then he hit yes. Because sometimes redemption doesn't wait until you feel ready. It begins the moment you say yes to serving instead of hiding. He looked up, the drizzle fading, moonlight finding the hood of his car. It wasn't too late. God was still writing. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Lead me, Lord." The city seemed quieter now, like heaven had turned the volume down. Somewhere a streetlight flickered, a pulse of grace in the dark. He thought of Lily again, her quiet strength, her unbroken faith. And he knew this time he wouldn't run from what hurt. He'd walk straight into it, man, because love, real love, redeems. And this time, he would stay until God finished the story. Carter parked in front of his building, but he couldn't bring himself to get out of the car. Through the glass doors, he could see the reflection of his own life, polished yet hollow. The lobby's marble floors had once made him proud. Now they felt like a museum for pride. He leaned his head back, whispering, "How did I get so far from who I was?" There was no answer, only the echo of his own choices. For the first time, he realized success had given him everything except peace. And peace was what Lily had all along, even when she had nothing. He thought of that last night again, the one he'd buried under excuses. He'd stood by the door, suitcase in hand, while Lily begged him to stay. "Carter, please. God has a plan even when we don't see it," she'd said. But he'd laughed, bitter and cold, saying, "God doesn't pay rent." Those words haunted him more than any boardroom decision ever could. They were the walls between him and the only woman who ever prayed for him. Now, years later, he'd give away every dollar to take them back. He finally entered the apartment, sleek, modern, empty. The hum of the city came through the windows like a distant sermon. He set his keys down on the marble counter, the sound echoing loneliness. A picture on the wall showed him at an award gala, smile flawless, eyes lifeless. He stared at that version of himself, the man who thought he'd won. He didn't recognize him anymore, and strangely, that felt like hope. Because maybe losing himself was the first step toward finding grace. He opened his laptop and searched for the church he'd once driven past. It wasn't far, just a few blocks from where he'd seen Lily. The website banner read, "No one too lost for God to find." He felt something tighten in his chest, conviction mixed with invitation. There was a volunteer tab, a list of needs, faces, names. He scrolled until he saw community shelter team, open shifts. Without thinking twice, he signed up for every Friday night. As the confirmation email appeared, a calmness settled over him. It wasn't excitement or relief, and it was surrender. He realized how long it had been since he'd done something without expecting reward, since he'd given from the heart, not from obligation. He closed his eyes, picturing Lily's face under that gray sky. The steadiness in her eyes wasn't just strength. It was faith tested and proven. He wanted to learn that kind of faith, not the kind that negotiates with God. He found himself walking toward the small wooden cross that hung in his study. It had been a gift from Lily, one he'd almost thrown away. Now he reached out, brushing the dust from its edges like a long-forgotten prayer. The symbol didn't accuse him. It welcomed him back. "Lord," he whispered, "I've been trying to fix my life with my own hands." His voice cracked as he continued, "But maybe what you wanted was my heart." And for the first time in years, he felt heard. He sat on the floor, head bowed, letting tears fall freely. Every mistake, every selfish pursuit, every closed door, that all came back. But this time he didn't hide from it. He let it break him. Because maybe brokenness wasn't a curse, maybe it was an invitation. He remembered Lily's soft words. Even shattered things can shine when light finds them. Now he finally understood what she meant. The pieces weren't wasted. They were waiting for grace to make them whole. When Carter finally rose, Dawn was brushing light over the skyline. The world outside looked the same, but something in him had shifted. The ache hadn't disappeared, and it had been redeemed by purpose. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He'd show up. Not as the man who left, but as the one willing to rebuild. He looked toward the cross one last time before leaving for the shelter. And with quiet conviction, he whispered, "God, I'm ready to start over." Morning crept through the thin curtains of Lily's small apartment, painting soft gold on cracked walls. She sat on the edge of her bed, Bible open, steam from her coffee rising like prayer. Her children were still asleep, two small miracles breathing evenly in the quiet. Outside, the sound of buses and distant chatter reminded her that the world never waits. But she didn't rush. She had learned that strength often comes from stillness. Her thumb traced the verse she'd read 1,000 times. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted." She smiled faintly, whispering, "Then you must be sitting right beside me." The kitchen light flickered as she poured cereal into mismatched bowls. She hummed a hymn under her breath, the kind her mother used to sing on stormy days. When the children woke, they greeted her with sleepy smiles that made every struggle worth it. "Mommy, can we go to the park after school?" her son asked, eyes bright with hope. "Maybe if I finish work early," she said, brushing a curl from his forehead. Her daughter hugged her leg, murmuring, "You'll finish early. God helps you." And in that moment, Faith felt like something she could hold. After dropping them off at school, Lily walked toward the diner where she worked mornings. The wind nipped at her cheeks, carrying the smell of coffee and car exhaust. She wrapped her coat tighter, whispering prayers between breaths. "Lord, give me strength for today. Just today." She didn't ask for miracles, only endurance. Behind the counter, the same chipped plates and burnt smell of toast welcomed her. Routine was her rhythm. Survival was her song. The regulars came in, construction workers, teachers, one retired pastor who always tipped in scripture notes. "Isaiah 58, he said with a wink, sliding a folded paper across the counter. Lily unfolded it when he left. "You will be like a well-watered garden." The word struck something deep, a promise whispered over exhaustion. She tucked the note into her apron pocket, close to her heart. Sometimes God didn't speak in thunder. Sometimes he used paper scraps and tired hands, and Lily listened to every whisper as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. At noon, she stepped outside for her 5-minute break. The world felt heavy, yet strangely beautiful under the pale sun. Cars passed, laughter echoed, and she stood between chaos and calm. Her phone buzzed with an overdue bill reminder. Her stomach clenched. She exhaled slowly, pressing her palm over her chest. "God, I trust you," she said aloud, even when trust trembled. Faith, she knew, was a choice made on shaky ground. When the shift ended, she hurried across town for her second job, cleaning offices downtown. Her shoes squeaked against polished floors, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air. She worked in silence, imagining her children finishing homework at the neighbors. Sometimes she hummed softly, songs of worship muffled beneath the hum of vacuum motors. Her body ached, but her soul stayed awake. Faith was her caffeine. Every wiped desk, every polished handle became an act of love. This too is worship, she often reminded herself. At 9 p.m., she returned home, her legs trembling with fatigue. The children were asleep on the couch. Cartoons paused mid-laughter. She smiled, kissed their foreheads, and covered them with the thin blanket. On the table lay 2 drawings, a stick figure family with an unfamiliar man beside them. "Mom, Us, and the Kind Man" was written in a child's scrawl. Her heart tightened, realizing they were talking about Carter. The past she'd buried was suddenly sitting in crayon color on her kitchen table. She sank into a chair, staring at the drawing until her eyes blurred. That man, the one who left her standing in tears all those years ago, was helping them now. Why, she didn't know. Maybe guilt. Maybe God, maybe both. Part of her wanted to shut the door again before pain found its way back in. But another part, the softer, braver part, whispered that maybe this time was different. Maybe God wasn't reopening a wound. Maybe he was healing it from the inside out, and that thought terrified her as much as it comforted her. Later that night, she knelt beside her bed, the floor cold beneath her knees. "Lord," she whispered, "if this is you, please make it clear. I can't afford false hope." Tears slid down her cheeks, but they weren't bitter, they were releasing. She didn't pray for Carter to come back. She prayed for strength to forgive. She prayed to love without losing herself again. She prayed that her children would never know the loneliness she once felt. And as she prayed, she felt the quiet warmth that only grace can bring. The next morning came early, light breaking through gray clouds. Her son ran to her holding a coin, shouting, "Look, God sent us treasure." It was just a quarter, dull and small, but Lily laughed out loud. "Yes, sweetheart. God's blessings come in all sizes." She pocketed the coin, knowing heaven often hides in small details. Sometimes miracles don't look like abundance, they look like enough. And enough was all she needed. That afternoon at the diner, she heard something unexpected. Two co-workers were talking about the shelter downtown. "They've got a new volunteer," one said. "Some rich guy who actually shows up." Lily's heart skipped, though she pretended not to hear. "Rich guy, new volunteer." The words tangled like prophecy. She couldn't stop the question forming quietly in her chest. Could it be him? Faith and fear often arrive hand in hand. That night, she took the long way home, passing the shelter's block. Lights glowed from the windows, silhouettes moving inside. Laughter drifted into the street, a sound both ordinary and holy. She stopped, hand on the fence, unsure whether to go in or walk away. Something in her spirit nudged softly. "Don't run this time." She whispered, "Lord, if this is part of your plan, I'll trust you." And for the first time, she didn't feel alone in the waiting. Inside, Carter was sweeping floors he used to walk past without seeing. He didn't know Lily was standing outside, a prayer on her lips. Their worlds, once torn apart by pride, were circling back through grace. God was writing what neither of them dared to imagine. Each step, each breath, each surrender was aligning for something eternal. In heaven's timing, there are no coincidences, only callings. And tonight, both of their hearts beat quietly in sync again. Back at home, Lily tucked the children into bed with extra kisses. She felt peace settle like warm light over her shoulders. The fear of the past was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She was learning to walk by faith, not by the memory of pain. Her heart whispered a new prayer, not for answers, but for courage. "God," she said softly, "teach me to recognize redemption when it knocks." And maybe redemption was already standing on the other side of her door. The next day dawned bright, skies clear as a promise. Lily braided her daughter's hair and packed their lunches with a hum in her chest. She caught her reflection in the mirror. Weary, yes, but glowing. Not from rest, but from purpose. She had no idea what God was preparing, but she sensed movement. Something unseen was unfolding. Gentle yet unstoppable, faith, once fragile, was now becoming her fire. At the diner, her boss handed her a new schedule with fewer hours. "I'm sorry, Lily, business is slow," he said apologetically. Her stomach sank. Less income meant harder choices. But instead of panicking, she breathed deeply and whispered, "God will provide." And somehow she believed it, because she'd seen his fingerprints on smaller things before, and she knew that behind every loss he was still working. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she walked past the shelter again. Through the window, she saw Carter helping an elderly man into a chair. Something inside her shifted. Not resentment, not fear, but recognition. The man sweeping floors was not the same one who once walked away. He looked different, smaller, gentler, redeemed. She closed her eyes, tears warm against the cold air. "Okay, God," she whispered. "If this is your doing, I won't resist it." That night, she sat by the window, lights from the street shimmering like hope. Her Bible lay open beside her, the page marked by that folded note, Isaiah 58. She reread the words aloud. "You will be like a well-watered garden." Her voice trembled, not from doubt, but from awe. For the first time in years, she believed God could make beauty grow again, not just in her life, but in the space where broken hearts meet forgiveness. And in that truth, she finally rested. The shelter was quieter than usual that evening, as if even the walls sensed something sacred. Carter stood by the supply table, sleeves rolled up, sorting canned goods by expiration dates. Every clang of metal echoed like a heartbeat in prayer. He'd spent weeks volunteering, showing up early, leaving late, learning humility with each box lifted. He didn't expect grace to feel like sweat and sore muscles, yet it did. Every thank you from a stranger felt like God whispering, "Keep going." And tonight, without knowing it, Grace was about to look him in the eyes again. Lily hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the handle. Through the glass, she saw him laughing softly with a young volunteer. That smile, familiar yet softened by something holy, caught her off guard. Her heart stuttered between forgiveness and fear. It had taken years to stand again without bitterness. Now she wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, but Faith whispered, "You prayed for clarity, this is it." She drew a long breath and stepped inside. The sound of her footsteps made Carter turn before she could speak. Time seemed to pause again, but this time it didn't hurt him when it hummed with purpose. "Lily," he breathed, voice trembling like the first note of a hymn. She didn't run. She just stood there, framed by the door, dignity intact. Her presence filled the room with warmth he hadn't felt since the old apartment days. He almost smiled, then caught the tears forming in her eyes. "Hi, Carter," she said softly. The same words as that day on Main Street, but different now. He stepped forward but stopped halfway, unsure of the distance grace allows. "I didn't think I'd see you here," she said, her tone careful but kind. "I didn't either," he admitted, hands in pockets, humility plain on his face. He wanted to say 100 things, to spill every apology at her feet. But the spirit seemed to still his tongue. Not yet, not all at once. Instead, he asked, "Can I show you something?" Lily hesitated, then nodded, curiosity winning over fear. He led her toward the back room, shelves lined with blankets and donated clothes. "This used to be an empty storage space," he explained. "Now it's a care center for families." Lily glanced around, eyes catching on the colorful notes taped to the walls. Children had written "thank you" and "God bless you" in shaky crayon letters. Her throat tightened as she read one that said, "For Mom." She turned to Carter slowly, voice almost breaking. "You did this?" He shook his head. "God did. I just showed up." The silence that followed was thick but not heavy. It was the kind that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Lily ran her hand along a row of folded blankets. Neat, warm, ready. Her eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude or remembrance. She'd once been the one receiving these gifts, not organizing them. Now she saw both sides, the hand that gives and the one that receives. And in that sacred space, she realized both belonged to Grace. Carter spoke again, quieter this time. "I didn't come here to fix things." His gaze held hers, steady but vulnerable. "I came here to learn how to serve." Lily crossed her arms, not defensively but thoughtfully. "Serving isn't about penance, Carter," she said gently. "It's about love." He nodded, almost smiling. "Then maybe I'm finally learning what love really is." Her lips parted, words caught in wonder. The man she saw now wasn't the same one who'd walked away. Volunteers passed behind them, laughter echoing like faint music. Carter glanced around nervously, then back to her. "I didn't mean for you to find out I was helping," he said. "I know," she replied, surprising even herself with the calm in her tone. "I wasn't ready to see you," she added, her honesty tender, not sharp. "Neither was I," he confessed, hands trembling slightly. "But I think God was." Her laughter came unexpectedly, soft and real, the kind that reaches the heart first. It disarmed him completely, making the air lighter, almost holy. "God has a way of doing that," she said, brushing a tear she hadn't noticed. Carter smiled, his eyes glistening under the shelter's fluorescent light. "He keeps bringing me back to the places I ran from," he murmured. "Maybe that's where redemption starts," she replied. "Not where we're strong, but where we finally surrender." Lily helped him stack boxes in silence for a while. Each small motion, the rustle of cardboard, the hum of distant voices, felt sacred. They didn't need to fill the space with explanations. Grace was already speaking. After a while, Carter whispered, "You always believed more than I did." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I stopped believing in you for a while." He nodded, guilt flickering across his face like shadow and light. "Then maybe I'm here to earn that faith back," he said. "Not earn," she corrected softly. "Faith isn't earned, Carter. It's received." The way she said his name was both a balm and a wound. He inhaled sharply, humbled by the truth she carried so easily. "Then I'll receive it," he said. "Even if it takes me a lifetime to understand how." Her eyes softened. She could see his sincerity now. Maybe this was what true repentance looked like. Not words, but changed posture. And in that realization, her walls began to crack. Not from pain, but from light. A sudden commotion at the entrance pulled their attention. An elderly woman had tripped near the doorway, groceries scattering. Carter rushed forward instinctively, kneeling to help her. Lily followed, handing the woman her cane, both of them moving in quiet sync. When the woman smiled through tears and said, "God bless you both," something shifted. Lily's heart fluttered, not from romance but from revelation. Maybe this was how love begins again, not with words but with service. As the evening closed, Lily found herself sitting beside Carter at a folding table. They shared a cup of coffee, steam curling between them like a fragile truce. "I used to think love was about promises," Carter said, voice low. "Now I think it's about presence." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Promises fade," she said. "But presence, that's where God works." And somehow that one sentence felt like healing. When the volunteers began cleaning up, Lily reached for her coat. Carter walked her to the door, but neither spoke at first. The night air met them like a breath of freedom. Streetlights shimmered on wet pavement, glowing like liquid grace. "I don't know where this is going," he admitted honestly. "You don't have to," she said. "Just keep walking toward the light." And she meant it, not just for him, but for herself too. They stood for a moment in quiet understanding. Carter's gaze lingered, not out of longing, but reverence. Lily gave a small nod, then turned toward the bus stop. He watched her go, each step illuminated by soft streetlight. When she looked back once, their eyes met, brief but eternal. Neither of them smiled, yet everything in them did. Grace had begun its quiet work. Back inside, Carter sat alone, the shelter now empty and still. He bowed his head, fingers interlocked, whispering thanks. Not for a second chance at love, but for the chance to become new. He finally understood that redemption isn't an event. It's a walk. And faith isn't about being fearless, it's about taking the next step trembling. He smiled, tears slipping down his cheeks unnoticed. Tomorrow he knew he'd show up again, because grace always does. Lily's bus rolled through the sleeping city, windows fogged by warmth. She leaned her head against the glass, heart steady for the first time in years. Outside, snowflakes danced under the streetlights like silent amens. Her reflection stared back and weary, hopeful, redeemed in process. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, Lord, for meeting us halfway." The rhythm of the road matched the rhythm of her peace. And somewhere in the night, two prayers met in the same sky. Rain tapped softly against the shelter's roof that evening, steady and rhythmic like God's heartbeat. Carter stood by the door, watching droplets streak down the glass in silver threads. The night crew had gone home, leaving only the hum of the heater and the scent of coffee. He'd stayed behind again, sorting donations that didn't need sorting. Anything to keep his hands busy because his mind wasn't. He kept seeing Lily's eyes from the night before, calm, kind, and full of grace. He knew it was time to stop hiding behind silence. He sat down, elbows on knees, whispering to the empty room, "Lord, give me courage." For weeks he'd served, repented, and prayed, but this was different. This wasn't about fixing a program or cleaning floors. It was about confessing the weight he'd carried for years, the sin he never truly faced. He'd apologized to God countless times, but not to the one who bore the wound. Redemption, he was learning, always has a name. And tonight, that name was Lily. The next morning, Lily arrived at the shelter earlier than usual. She wasn't sure why. Maybe something in her spirit had drawn her. The air was still damp from the night's rain, streets glistening like mirrors. She carried a small bag of baked goods for the volunteers, a simple act of thanks. When she stepped inside, she saw him, alone at the table, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Carter?" she called softly. He lifted his head, relief and dread tangled in the same breath. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, standing quickly, wiping his palms on his jeans. His voice was low, trembling with sincerity. "I need to tell you something. Everything, actually." Lily hesitated, her instinct urging caution, her heart urging grace. She nodded slowly, setting the bag down on the counter. "All right," she said. "Then tell me." Her tone wasn't harsh. It was holy, as if she'd already prayed for this moment. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping under invisible weight. "When I left, I told myself it was for us, for our future," he began. But it wasn't. It was pride, plain and simple. I wanted to prove I didn't need God, or anyone. His eyes fell to the floor, shame painting shadows across his face. I thought money would fill the hole where faith used to live. He looked up then, raw and unguarded. But success without peace feels like drowning in clean water. Lily said nothing. She let silence be the mercy between them. He continued, voice breaking like glass under truth. I told myself you'd move on, that you were better off without me. He swallowed hard, the memory scraping his throat. But every time I tried to forget you, God reminded me of the woman who prayed while I mocked. He blinked back tears. You believed when I didn't. You forgave before I even asked. And that haunted me more than any failure ever could. Lily's eyes softened, but her hands clasped together tightly. She had dreamed of hearing these words once, but not like this. They didn't feel like closure. They felt like calling. Carter, she said gently, you hurt me deeply. But I see now, you hurt yourself too. Her honesty disarmed him. Her compassion undid him. He nodded, tears slipping free. Every night I replay that door closing. And every night I wish I'd turned back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the mended paper snowflake. I kept this, he said, voice trembling. Your daughter gave it to me that day. Lily's breath caught as she hadn't known. He placed it gently on the table between them, like an offering. I told her broken doesn't mean finished, he whispered. And God used that to teach me what I refused to learn back then. That grace doesn't fix things, it transforms them. Lily stared at the small, torn edges, now repaired with careful hands. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. It was too perfect to be coincidence. She felt something holy move in the space between them. Forgiveness was near, knocking softly. But fear, too, whispered reminders of the past. She looked at Carter and said, You're not the same man I knew. And somehow that sentence held both comfort and warning. Carter exhaled shakily, nodding. No, I'm not. At least I pray I'm not. He rubbed his palms together, grounding himself in truth. I've been rebuilding, but not my image, my heart. I've been showing up where I once turned away. His eyes glistened as he spoke. And I'm not asking for your love. I'm asking for your forgiveness, even if it takes time. Even if it never looks like it used to. Lily turned toward the window, where rain began to fall again. Drops slid down the glass like tears she didn't want to show. You know, she said softly, I used to pray God would make you see. And when he finally did, I didn't expect it to hurt this much. He stood silently, absorbing the truth. Forgiveness isn't easy, she continued. It's not a switch you flip. It's a walk. One step, one prayer, one surrender at a time. Carter nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll walk it, he said, even if you never walk beside me again. The humility in his tone pierced through the remnants of her doubt. Maybe, she replied. God's not asking me to walk away this time. He looked at her, hope flickering like the first spark of dawn. Her next words steadied them both. But if we're going to walk, Carter, it has to be toward him, not just each other. That sentence broke something open in him, not pain, but release. He reached for the snowflake again, fingers trembling. Then let's let God decide what this becomes, he said softly. Lily nodded, tears falling freely now. That's all I ever wanted. For a moment, they simply stood there, unguarded and unfinished. The past wasn't gone, but grace was rewriting its language. And the air between them felt lighter than forgiveness. It felt like freedom. A volunteer entered quietly, unaware of the holy ground she'd stepped onto. Hey, we're serving dinner downstairs, she said with a smile. Carter glanced at Lily, silently asking if she'd stay. Lily hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, I'll help. As they walked down together, side by side, something invisible shifted. No promises, no declarations, just presence. The kind of presence where healing begins. Downstairs, laughter and the smell of soup filled the air. Children's voices rose like music over the clatter of bowls. Lily ladled soup. Carter handed out bread, their hands brushing once briefly. It wasn't romantic, and it was redemptive. For a fleeting second, both felt it. The peace that passes understanding. The kind that only comes when two broken hearts surrender to the same Savior. And both silently thanked God for the second chance neither expected. Later that night, when everyone had gone, Carter stood by the doorway. He watched Lily gather her things, tucking her Bible into her purse. Thank you for listening, he said quietly. She smiled faintly, eyes tired but gentle. Thank you for speaking. He reached for the light switch but paused, looking at her once more. Lily, he said. "I don't deserve this, Grace." She met his gaze and whispered, "None of us do. That's why it's Grace." As Lily stepped into the night, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening. She pulled her coat tight, inhaling the scent of wet pavement and hope. Behind her, the shelter lights glowed like a beacon in the dark. Each step she took felt steadier than the last. Carter watched from the doorway, hands in pockets, heart still trembling. He didn't follow, he just prayed. "God, don't let me waste this second chance." Back home, Lily stood by the window, rainwater dripping from her coat. Her children slept peacefully, their dreams untouched by the day's revelations. She looked toward the stars breaking through the clearing clouds. Her whisper was simple, but it shook the heavens. "Lord, help me forgive fully, and not because he deserves it, but because you freed me first." And somewhere across the city, Carter whispered the same prayer. Two voices, one savior, redemption in perfect harmony. The following week began with sunlight and ended in shadows. Carter walked into the shelter one evening to find whispers waiting. Phones lit up, volunteers staring down at screens, confusion painted on their faces. A news alert read, "Local businessman accused of misuse of funds from corporate foundation," and beneath it, his name. His photo, his past mistakes reborn like ghosts. He froze, breath catching, old panic clawing at the edges of Grace. Redemption, it seemed, had found its first storm. Lily arrived moments later, unaware of the noise until she saw his face. He stood in the corner, phone in hand, eyes dark and distant. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Carter looked at her, shame thick in his throat. "An old partner. They're twisting things I did years ago," he said quietly. "I'm not guilty of theft, but I'm guilty of pride. And now it's catching up to me." Lily's heart sank. Grace had brought them here. The world was trying to drag them back. The headlines spread faster than truth could defend itself. By morning, Carter's name was everywhere. News, blogs, whispers at every cafe. The company he'd sold months ago was under investigation, but the world remembered only him. He spent the day answering calls, apologizing, explaining, though no one truly listened. In one cruel instant, his redemption was reduced to scandal, and in the midst of it all, one thought haunted him more than any headline.
What will Lily think of me now?
That night, he sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by silence too loud to bear. He wanted to run again, to hide where no one could see him fall twice. But running had always been his first sin. So he fell to his knees instead, right there on the cold tile floor. "God," he whispered, "don't let me ruin what you've started." His tears hit the ground like rain, washing years of pride away. This time he didn't beg for rescue, only for strength to endure. Meanwhile, Lily heard the whispers at the diner. Customers spoke in half-truths. Co-workers exchanged pitying glances. She kept her composure, pouring coffee, smiling politely, pretending not to hear. But her heart was at war, between disappointment and compassion. She had seen his change, felt his humility, watched his faith take root. Could all that have been an act? Or was this what faith looks like when tested? She decided she needed to see him. Not the news, not the noise, him. When she arrived at the shelter that evening, he was already there. The place was empty except for him, sweeping floors just like before. "Carter," she said softly, her voice cutting through the quiet. He turned, surprise flickering into gratitude. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Neither should you," she replied gently. "But here we are." For a long moment, they stood facing each other, silence their only language. Then she stepped closer, faith leading where fear could not. "I read the news," she said finally. "Everyone's talking." He nodded, setting the broom aside, shoulders heavy with defeat. "I know I deserve the judgment for who I used to be." Lily shook her head slowly. "Deserve? Carter, Grace doesn't work like that." He laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the world outside." "I'm not here for them," she said, her tone steady and sure. "I'm here because I believe the man I've seen these past weeks is real." Her words broke him in ways that headlines never could. He took a shaky step forward, eyes wet with relief. "I'm not asking you to defend me," he said. "I just don't want to disappoint you." Lily smiled sadly, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "You will. People do. I will too. But God never does." That truth settled like balm on both their wounds, and in that moment faith became the bridge neither could burn. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the sky. The rain began again, gentle, cleansing, relentless. They worked side by side, restocking shelves in silence. Every shared motion spoke what words could not. I see you. I believe you. After a while, Carter said quietly, I used to pray God would erase my past. Lily looked at him, eyes calm. He doesn't erase, he redeems. And redemption always tells the truth before it heals. The next day brought more backlash, but Carter showed up anyway. Reporters waited outside, flashing cameras, shouting questions like accusations. He answered none, choosing service over self-defense. The shelter doors became his sanctuary, not his escape. Inside, Lily watched him kneel to clean spilled soup from the floor. No suits, no titles, no applause, and just humility that spoke louder than sermons. And somehow that image deepened her trust more than any promise could. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the noise began to fade. Truth came to light. The company's new owners had twisted records to save themselves. Carter was cleared of wrongdoing, but the ordeal left scars deeper than before. When the shelter team celebrated his name's restoration, he shook his head. Don't celebrate me, he said quietly. Celebrate what grace can rebuild. Lily watched him from across the room, pride soft in her chest. God wasn't just redeeming his reputation, he was redeeming his heart. Later that evening, Carter walked Lily to the bus stop once more. The air was cool, the city lights reflecting on puddles like stained glass. I don't know why you stayed, he said quietly, eyes searching hers. She smiled, pulling her scarf tighter. Because God didn't tell me to leave. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of heaven. He looked away for a moment, overwhelmed by grace undeserved. Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving he was right, he whispered. Lily shook her head gently. Don't prove it to me, Carter. Live it before God. That's all the proof I need. The humility in her tone disarmed his defenses again. He nodded, his voice trembling. I just want to be the man he wanted me to be. She smiled softly. Then stop trying to be. Just let him make you. He laughed through tears, a sound caught between joy and surrender. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like pressure. It felt like peace. Back at home that night, Lily sat by the window with her Bible open. Her children slept soundly in the next room, unaware of life's unfolding grace. She underlined a verse she'd read to exhaustion. He restores my soul. She paused, letting each word rest inside her like a heartbeat. It wasn't just Carter's story, it was hers too. God hadn't just restored him. He was restoring her ability to trust again, and that kind of healing only comes from heaven. Carter spent the night walking through the city, hands in pockets, thoughts in prayer. He passed by the same corner where he'd first seen Lily months ago. The sidewalk was empty now, but memory filled the space. He could still see her, holding that sign unbroken in the storm. He whispered into the cold air, "Thank you, God, for letting me see her again." A tear slipped free, landing on the pavement where Grace first found him. And he smiled, knowing every step since had been led by mercy. A few days later, Carter spoke at the shelter's Sunday gathering. He didn't preach, he just told his story. I thought God's forgiveness meant forgetting what I did, he said softly. But now I know it means remembering and walking differently because of it. The room was silent, filled with that kind of stillness only truth creates. Lily listened from the back, her heart swelling with something beyond pride. It was peace, the kind that only blooms where surrender has been planted. After the meeting, she approached him with the children beside her. Her son smiled, holding out a drawing, 4 figures hand in hand under a bright sun. This time, he said proudly, I put you in the middle, Mr. Carter. Carter knelt, tears spilling freely. That's the best place I've ever been. Lily's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Her smile said enough. Grace had not erased the past. It had rewritten it with love. And for the first time, they both believed in tomorrow. That night, the city seemed softer, lighter, redeemed. The rain had stopped, replaced by a sky full of stars. Carter looked up, whispering, I don't deserve this. And deep inside, he heard the quiet answer of a faithful God. You never did. That's why it's called grace. He closed his eyes, breathing in the truth until it settled like peace. And somewhere across the city, Lily whispered the same prayer of thanks. Morning light spilled across the shelter's floor like mercy made visible. Carter unlocked the side door carrying crates of fresh produce. He paused to pray short and simple the way he'd learned here. "Jesus, make me useful," he whispered, not trusting eloquent words. The building answered with quiet, and quiet felt like yes. He wrote the day's tasks on the whiteboard, small obediences in rows. Redemption, he'd discovered, was a checklist of love. By 9, he was loading pantry bags with rice and fruit. No press, no photos, no one to impress, just names on cards. He called each name as if it belonged at his own table. "Good morning, Ms. Alvarez. It's good to see you again." A handshake here, a lifted box there, a joke to ease the weight. He learned stories faster than he learned systems. People, he realized, are the curriculum of grace. Lily arrived with the children and a pan of warm cornbread. She set it down, eyes meeting his with quiet warmth. They didn't hurry toward each other. They honored the work first. Only after the trays were labeled did they share a smile. Her presence steadied him like a hand on a shoulder. He didn't wonder if she'd come anymore. He planned around it. Faith had turned hope into habit. The kids took their jobs seriously, aprons nearly swallowing them. Her son inspected apples like a tiny foreman with standards. Her daughter drew hearts on the brown bags for extra blessing. Carter knelt to tie the boy's loose shoelace, not steady and sure. "Double loop," he said, like a dad teaching a secret. The boy grinned, storing the trick like treasure. Small lessons felt like liturgy. At noon, Carter posted a flyer for Community Day Saturday. Free haircuts, hot meals, coats, prayer corner, and music. He'd learned to ask churches, barbers, and bakers to partner. Generosity, it turned out, was contagious when invited gently. Lily read the flyer and traced the word community. "Not charity," she said softly. "Family." He nodded, grateful she could name what his heart meant. They spent the week preparing like a wedding of ordinary things. Tables were repaired, chairs wiped down, banners hand-painted. Carter tested coffee urns as if salvation depended on warmth. Lily coordinated volunteers with calm authority and a laugh. They planned a small kids' corner with crayons and story Bibles. Her daughter insisted on glitter, holiness underlined in sparkle. Even the mop bucket felt part of the mission. Saturday came bright and brisk, a sky rinsed clean of worry. Music drifted from a borrowed speaker, soft as welcome. Carter greeted guests while Lily guided them like a shepherd. Barbers buzzed, cooks served, prayers rose like steam. The building felt bigger, as if love had added square footage. In the bustle, their eyes met and both breathed thank you. Grace had thrown a feast and filled every seat. Near noon, Carter climbed 2 steps and cleared his throat. He hated microphones, but he loved these people. "My name is Carter," he said, "and I'm here to learn how to love." He didn't list donors or mention spreadsheets. He told a simple story about leaving and returning. "God didn't erase me," he finished. "He remade me." Applause sounded like rain on a dry roof. Lily stepped up only when someone asked for a word. "I used to think strength meant never needing help," she said. "Now I know strength is sharing the load." She looked at the room like a mother looks at a table. "If you need bread, take 2. If you need prayer, take my hand." Her voice trembled, but her feet did not. Courage here wore an apron. During cleanup, a boy pressed a drawing into Carter's palm. 4 stick figures again, hands connected beneath a yellow sun. This time a cross stood in the background like a lighthouse. "Mr. C," the boy said, "I put Jesus where he can see us." Carter blinked away, a sting behind his eyes. "Perfect placement," he managed, tucking it near his heart. "Some art belongs in the rib cage." A sudden commotion rippled by the door. A man was shaking. Old trauma, quick breath, eyes wild with memories. Carter crouched low, voice gentle as a lullaby. "You're safe. You're here. Breathe with me. In, out." He counted slow, palms open, shoulders relaxed in invitation. Lily knelt opposite, matching the rhythm in quiet harmony. Peace arrived on the cadence of patience. Minutes later, the man sagged into a chair, storm passing. Lily brought water. Carter fetched a blanket still warm from the dryer. No sermon, just presence. No spotlight, just care. The man whispered, "Why are you kind?" Through cracked lips. Carter answered, "Because he was kind to me first." He didn't point upward. He simply looked grateful. Sometimes testimony is tone before its words. The afternoon softened into small conversations and big relief. Carter fixed a wobbly stroller with a borrowed wrench. Lily wrote a phone number for a job lead on a paper cup. Her daughter handed out the last cookies like communion. Her son invented a system for carrying boxes like a forklift. Laughter braided through fatigue until both felt holy. Joy, they learned, is sturdy enough to carry weight. Sunday morning, a nearby church invited shelter guests to service. Carter hesitated at the door, hat in hand like a teenager. Lily brushed his sleeve, a quiet nudge across the threshold. Inside, wood and light and memory welcomed him home. They sang a hymn he half remembered from long ago. His voice broke on the line about amazing grace. Breaking, he learned, is the doorway to belonging. After service, the pastor smiled without curiosity or fame. "Keep showing up," he told Carter, "and let God shape the rest." Carter nodded like a man receiving a map. Lily stood nearby, relief blooming where fear used to camp. She didn't need eloquence or apology anymore. She needed fruit, and it was growing. Nothing louder than a changed life. That evening, Lily's daughter slipped her hand into Carter's. "Uncle Carter," she said, testing the title like a new song. He didn't correct it. He received it trembling. Names he knew are covenants measured in presence. He swung her gently, laughter ringing down the block. Lily watched, the past loosening its last knot. Hope looked like small fingers trusting a large hand. "Can I help with school supplies this month?" he asked later. "Not to fick and to share," he added quickly. Lily weighed the sentence, then the posture inside it. "Yes," she said, "and we can make a list together." Together landed in both of them like a warm coat. Partnership, not rescue. Stewardship, not control. They walked the aisle of mercy side by side. Midweek, Carter met with the board of a new nonprofit. He slid a proposal across a scarred table, voice steady. Single mom scholarships, job training, childcare stipends. He named it The Well after Isaiah's promise. On the final page, a dedication, founded in honor of Lily Harper's faith. He didn't look at her while they voted. He prayed instead. Unanimous yes sounded like a bell in his chest. The dedication day was small on purpose, no stage required. A wooden plaque, sanded smooth, hung near the pantry door. Lily's table, where burdens are shared and bread multiplies. Lily touched the grain, eyes bright with unshed joy. Carter stood back, letting her be the loudest story in the room. The kids clapped like fireworks, proud beyond measure. He learned that honor is happiest from the second row. As dusk poured lavender down Main Street, they locked up together. Cold air nipped, but peace wrapped them in something warmer. "Thank you," Lily said, words simple and exact. "For what?" he asked, unsure how to hold praise. "For showing up when you had reasons not to." He nodded, then asked, "Can we thank him together?" Their prayer rose like breath in winter, visible and true. Later, on the walk to the bus, they spoke of small next steps. Shoes for growing feet, a reason workshop, Tuesday night tutoring. No grand vows, no borrowed poetry, just plans to keep loving. At the curb, traffic sighed like a tired choir. Lily looked at him with the steadiness of answered prayer. "See you tomorrow," she said, not a question anymore. Tomorrow, he echoed, and meant forever, one day at a time. Back home, Carter pinned the new flyer above his desk. Beside it, the drawing with the cross watching from behind. He set his phone down and let the quiet have the room. "Thank you," he breathed. Not for outcomes, but for nearness. Redemption didn't make him larger. It made him small and free. He fell asleep before the prayer ended, safe at last. And somewhere across town, Lily slept the same way. Spring arrived quietly, shy green threading through the city's gray. Carter opened the shelter windows for the first time in months. Air rushed in, smelling of rain and something new, like freedom. He watched light crawl across the tables, touching everything it once avoided. Each morning now began with gratitude instead of guilt. He still prayed the same simple prayer, "Make me useful, Lord." But now he prayed it like a man already forgiven. Lily came earlier than usual that day, her hair loose, eyes bright. She brought muffins wrapped in a towel, still warm from the oven. "Breakfast for the early saints," she teased, setting them down. Carter smiled, not the nervous one, an easy, quiet smile. He poured her coffee, no words needed to fill the space. Peace had learned their names and made itself at home. Sometimes redemption looks exactly like routine. The children burst through the door minutes later, laughing. Her son waved a sheet of paper. "Mom, I won the art contest." Carter crouched, eyes wide. "Can I see?" The boy proudly showed a drawing. 4 people holding hands by a church. Above them, the sun wore a smile and the cross shone behind. Family, the title read in bold crayon letters. Lily blinked hard, pretending to fix her hair instead of crying. That afternoon, Carter met with the board of the well once more. They reviewed the first scholarship applications, stories like his own, mothers rebuilding, fathers returning, children daring to dream again. This, he said, voice thick, is why Grace never retires. The team agreed to open a second shelter in the next town. Carter didn't celebrate himself. He just whispered thanks. Impact, he'd learned, was worship when humility led. Lily visited his office later with a folder of job postings. "I want to help the next round of applicants personally," she said. He grinned, leaning back. "You mean lead the program?" She raised an eyebrow. "I mean serve it with you." They both laughed, the sound easy, unguarded, redeemed. Outside sunlight caught her profile, soft and strong. He thought, this is what answered prayer looks like. Evenings often ended on the church steps now. The children played tag while the adults sipped coffee and talked about hope. They didn't talk about the past anymore, it had lost its power. Carter had built a life with open doors and quiet corners. Lily had built peace in the same places that once held pain. Together they built trust, one small kindness at a time. Forgiveness had turned into friendship, and friendship into something eternal. One night during cleanup, Lily found him writing letters by hand. "To who?" she asked, leaning over his shoulder. "To everyone I hurt," he said simply. "Closure belongs to them too." She smiled softly. "That's brave." He shook his head. "No, it's obedience." Her hand rested lightly on his arm for a moment, silent blessing. Sometimes love speaks loudest when it says nothing at all. A few weeks later, the shelter hosted its first graduation ceremony. 10 women had completed training and secured new jobs. Carter handed each one a framed verse. "You are seen." The room filled with applause, but his eyes found only Lily. She stood in the back, proud, tears shining like glass in sunlight. He knew what she was thinking. God had turned pain into purpose. And every soul in that room was proof. After the crowd dispersed, Lily lingered near the doorway. Carter joined her, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Feels like the start of something bigger," she said quietly. "It is," he replied, watching the sunset through the open windows. She smiled. "You sound sure." "I'm not," he admitted. "But I know who is." And that was enough for both of them. Days folded into weeks, each one gentler than the last. Carter's name no longer carried scandal, only story. The world had moved on, but God's work continued quietly. Lily's children now ran through the halls calling his name freely. He didn't correct them. He simply lived worthy of the trust. Sometimes he'd look up mid-task and whisper, "Thank you, Lord," because gratitude was now his favorite language. One evening, after locking the shelter doors, Carter lingered outside. The air buzzed with crickets, stars just beginning to wake. Lily approached, scarf fluttering in the soft breeze. "I wanted to say something," she began, hesitant but smiling. He turned, heart steady, listening the way he'd learned to. "You've changed," she said. "Not for me, for him." He exhaled, a quiet amen hidden inside the breath. "I never thought I'd get to see this version of you," she continued, "and I never thought I'd deserve another chance to show it," he replied. Their eyes met. No tension, no unfinished business, only peace. Whatever this was becoming, it didn't need labels. It was simply 2 stories redeemed under the same author. "Thank you for forgiving me," he said, voice trembling. "Thank you for letting God do the work," she answered. Rain began to fall softly again, as if the heavens approved. Lily laughed, lifting her face toward the sky. Carter handed her his jacket and she shook her head. "Some blessings," she teased, "you have to feel." He chuckled, watching her spin once in the drizzle. Joy looked beautiful on her, it always had. And for the first time, he allowed himself to smile without guilt. They stood under the awning, watching the rain turn golden under streetlights. Carter's voice was almost a whisper. "Do you ever think about the past?" "Sometimes," she said, "but not with pain anymore." He nodded, understanding perfectly. She looked at him, a softness in her eyes like dawn. "God didn't give us back what we lost," she said. "He gave us something new." And in those words, he found every answer he'd prayed for. Months later, the well expanded into 3 cities. Lily led the community team. Carter focused on training new leaders. They traveled often together. Airports, schools, churches, second chances. Everywhere they went, people asked about their story. He always replied the same. It's not about us. It's about him. And each time Lily smiled, echoing his words silently. Their lives had become the sermon they once needed to hear. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, they returned to Main Street, the same corner where it all began, where Grace first interrupted pride. The old grocery store was gone, replaced by a small playground. Children laughed where sorrow once stood. Carter sat on a bench, tears slipping without shame. Full circle, Lily whispered beside him. Full, Grace, he corrected softly, eyes still on the sky. As twilight deepened, they walked home with the children between them. The city glowed like a painting signed by God himself. Every step echoed the rhythm of redemption, slow, steady, sure. Do you think God ever gets tired of forgiving us? Her son asked suddenly. Lily laughed gently. Never, sweetheart. That's his favorite thing to do. Carter squeezed the boy's shoulder, eyes wet again. Mine too, he said. And they all smiled at the truth. Later that night, Lily tucked her kids in while Carter cleaned the kitchen. He found her note on the counter, a single line in blue ink. Forgiveness planted a seed. Grace made it grow. He placed it in his wallet where his old business cards used to be. Outside, thunder rolled softly, a benediction in sound. He turned off the light, whispering, Lord, keep me rooted in this. And peace wrapped the room like a promise fulfilled. In the morning, sunlight spilled again across the city's heart. The shelter doors opened, laughter already echoing inside. Carter carried in fresh bread. Lily arranged flowers near the window. No speeches, no fanfare. Just the quiet rhythm of grace continuing. Outside, the sign read, Lily's Table, open daily. Inside, redemption lived in every breath, every act, every smile. And the story that began in brokenness ended in abundance. When God writes the story, he never ends it with regret. He ends it with redemption. If this story moved your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Because sometimes the miracle isn't that God changes our path, but that he lets us walk it again, this time with him. Subscribe to Redeemed Hearts for more stories of love, faith, and second chances.